I'm from the States. I'm from Chicago. I don't talk with a Chicago accent, but I'll talk slowly so that the words sink in. Has anybody ever seen this error message before? Sorry to interrupt. What else have you seen? Something went wrong, and you get really generic error messages. Okay, what we're here to talk about today is troubleshooting Lightning components, and this is normally a 2-hour plus presentation that I've put together over the years of teaching the Lightning development class. Barry Hughes is also an instructor for Trailhead, teaches this class. And one of the things that, as an instructor, that we have to do is, for 5 days, we walk around the room and we have to fix stuff because things break. And as developers, okay, we always have to fix stuff. Things are always breaking with Lightning. It's a new framework. We're trying to figure this out as we go. So what I've done is I've kind of whittled this down into a 25-minute presentation. I've practiced this. I've done the timing. The slides come in at about 25 minutes. So some of the stuff I'm going to kind of yada, yada, yada through if it's not really pertinent or if it's not of value. I'll try and get to some live demos wherever possible. But what I want to do is leave you with a framework for how to think about Lightning, how to think about troubleshooting Lightning components, and what some of the things that you're going to run into, some of the problems you're going to run into. So 10 seconds about me. My name is Mike Topalovich. I'm from Chicago. I heard these sessions were being recorded, and whenever my sessions are recorded, I always give a shout out to my kids, Mike and Aaron. Hi, Mike and Aaron. I've been a Salesforce developer for about a dozen years. I've been doing this for a long time. I've been an instructor for Salesforce University, now Trailhead, for the last 4 years. And I've been teaching the Lightning, the Dev 601 class for the last 2 years. Has anybody taken Dev 601? Great class. Did anybody have Barry as their instructor? Amazing instructor, right? Big hand for Barry, big hand for Barry. I think there's about 6 of us worldwide that actually teach this class, and it's been an adventure because this is a new framework. Lightning's only been around for about 3 years, and if you've been developing on this platform, you just run into silly issues, and you go, what the hell is going on here? So what we're going to cover today, we're going to talk about the tools. Okay, so we're going to start with the tools. What's available to you as a developer? How do you figure out what's going on with your Lightning components? We're going to talk about HTML and CSS issues, typically CSS issues. I mean, HTML's been around for 25 years now. You don't have problems with HTML. You have problems with CSS. We'll talk about that. We're going to talk about Lightning issues, okay, markup issues, eventing issues, the things you can run into with the platform itself. We're going to talk about JavaScript issues because this is a JavaScript framework. We're going to talk about common causes of Lightning component issues. I'm going to walk you through 4 methodologies. These are the methodologies that I use in class. When I'm walking around trying to fix student issues, these are the flows that I use to figure out what the hell is going on with Lightning. And then I'll leave you with some tips and tricks. OK, so the 4 tools that we most commonly use. You have the Chrome developer tools. And we're somewhat agnostic, but Chrome is the best browser to use when you're developing with Lightning because the built-in tools for Chrome, such as the Lightning Inspector and the Linter service plugin, okay, they're built for Chrome, but you could use Firebug for Firefox. You can use Firebug for Safari, whatever you want to use, but we're going to use the Chrome developer tools for troubleshooting HTML and CSS. We're going to use the Lightning Inspector. Has anybody actually used the Lightning Inspector? Okay, please do me a favor and go out and review it and give it 5 stars. For the last 2 years, it's had like 15 reviews, and it's like a 3.5-star review. It's the most important tool you could use if you're developing in Lightning. Developer Console, everybody knows Developer Console. We're going to talk about the Linter service as well, because I don't think a lot of folks realize that the Linter is available to you, and it does a lot of great things. Okay, so the Chrome developer tools, this is built into the Chrome browser. Has anybody ever looked at the source code for a Lightning application or component? There's nothing there. There's no HTML. There's no CSS. There's no there's JavaScript, but basically what happens is when you load a Lightning component or a Lightning application or Lightning experience, what happens is the Lightning component framework takes over the document object model. It takes over everything, and it injects HTML into the DOM. The only way to see the HTML that gets injected into that DOM is to use something like a Firebug or the Chrome Inspector tools. So if you use Chrome Inspector tools, you can go in and you can see the HTML that gets rendered. You can see the CSS that gets applied to those HTML elements. The Lightning Inspector. If we use the Lightning Inspector, we can inspect the performance of our application. We can inspect the component hierarchy. We can inspect events. Okay? This tool, if you don't have it installed, the first thing you need to do after the session is go install this plugin. The best part about it, it is free. We've all used the Cloud IDE, better known as Developer Console. Okay, Developer Console. The reason I bring this up is I'm going to talk about a methodology for troubleshooting server-side issues where you kind of tag team between the client side and server side, where you're looking at issues on the server side as well as issues on the client side and kind of comparing the two to see why things are happening. And then the Linter service. Has anybody used the Linter service? Okay, Linters, or a lint service in JavaScript, this is basically a rules engine that tells you, it kind of runs your JavaScript code through an engine that tells you whether your code is adhering to best practices. And what I found with the Linter service is if you have syntax issues that are going to cause runtime errors with the Lightning Component framework, the Linter service will find it, okay, before you run into that runtime error. The Linter service comes in a couple flavors. You can either just go, you can Google Lightning Linter service and you'll come up with a Heroku app. The Heroku app allows you to copy and paste your JavaScript code into a window and it'll run through your code, find out problems, or you can actually connect it through OAuth to your Salesforce instance. It'll run through all of your JavaScript code, your helpers, your controllers, your renderers, and it'll figure out what you screwed up. And you get things like, hey, unary operator ++ used. And then if you go and Google that, it'll tell you, okay, well, that's not a best practice. You want to use, var I equals 0, as long as I is less than this. And then instead of using the ++, you say I plus equals 1. Okay? And it's little things like this that kind of, most of us aren't great JavaScript developers. The Linter service will tell you, okay, this is not a best practice. You need to do it this way. Now, if you use the Chrome plugin for the Linter service, what happens is this only works if you're in Developer Console. And if you have the Problems tab open and you're looking at the controller, the helper, or the renderer, anything that has JavaScript, if there's a problem with your JavaScript, the Linter service plugin will take over the Problems tab and show you, okay, exactly what we just saw here. It'll take these error messages and it will show them in your Problems tab. This gets a little bit confusing because normally if we're developing Apex or Visualforce, if you have a problem, it means you have a compile time error. It means that your code didn't save. In Lightning, this doesn't mean that the compiler found anything because the compiler with Lightning right now is not great. It's not going to find a lot of your issues. The Linter is going to tell you, okay, here are your issues. Here are your syntax issues. Here are your JavaScript issues. Okay, so now when we troubleshoot CSS issues, and again, you're not going to run into HTML issues. At this stage in the game, HTML is just a language where you're putting elements onto a document and you're telling the browser where things should appear on the page. CSS is how we apply styling. Okay, but now as formerly Visualforce developers who are moving into Lightning, where we were only responsible for the back end before, now we're responsible for the front end as well. We're responsible for styling. We have to figure out, why is this div showing up on the right side of the screen when it should be showing up on the left side of the screen? Okay, why does this element not have a red border around it when I told it should have a red border? CSS is the bane of every developer's existence. I had a number of conversations last night at the pre-party where all we could do was bitch and complain about CSS because CSS sucks, all right? But as a developer, you have some recourse here. You have tools, and you're going to use you're going to use the Chrome Inspector, the Chrome Developer Tools. And what you can do is you can go and you can inspect issues with cascading, okay? How do style sheets get applied? Understanding cascading is the first thing you have to understand with CSS because CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Where is my inline style being applied versus where is my external style being applied? Selectors. Has anybody ever wondered why, in some cases, if you have .this and then space dot name of a class versus dot this and then no space, why there's a difference between that, that's CSS. I mean, not going to get into the specifics there. That's a dual selector versus a descendant selector, but understanding selectors is important. So you use the Chrome tools to figure out which style is being applied. Okay, is another style overriding my custom style? Layout. Layout is the most difficult thing to master in CSS. So this is where you're going to use your tools to go in and figure out, why is my layout completely screwed up? And then, of course, we have Lightning Design System, which just throws a wrench into everything. As you know, we're developing components that are supposed to be used in Lightning Experience. We have to apply the same look and feel. We have to understand how Lightning Design System works and how it applies styling to our components. Okay, with components themselves, and there's a whole laundry list here, typically what you're going to run into, the most frustrating issues with Lightning components are markup issues, because the compiler doesn't find them, you get a runtime error, sorry to interrupt, something went wrong, and you don't know what's going on. You don't know what is happening. So you have to go in and you have to troubleshoot your markup. Events, okay, events are getting easier to troubleshoot because of the Lightning Inspector for Chrome. You can go in and actually see where events are being raised, where they're being handled. Apex issues. Okay, when you have an Apex issue, if I have an issue with, let's say, a SOCL query, all you're going to get at the Lightning level is an internal server error. You're not going to get any specific error. It's going to say internal server error. So you have to understand where that's happening, how to fix it. Scoping, okay, private, public, global. Okay, if you've ever had an instance where it says, you know, let's see, property X of Y is undefined, or this property doesn't have access to this property, you're running into scoping issues where, okay, maybe I have a private attribute that I'm trying to access from another component. Or maybe I'm trying to access an attribute on a component in another namespace, and you're running into locker service issues. Has anybody ever run into a locker service issue? It's the most frustrating thing in the world, because then you have to go and learn what locker service is, and then when you go and try and learn what locker service is, you know less about locker service than when you started. Inheritance. Okay. Inheritance is a little bit difficult to understand because inheritance in Lightning is kind of a befuddling concept where we have supercomponents and subcomponents, and understanding what gets inherited by from a supercomponent versus what is being applied by a subcomponent. That's a difficult concept to master, but you run into this when you start to get into more advanced Lightning development. Context issues. When you start to learn about v.body, has anybody ever used the body of a component? Okay, if you look at the documentation for any Lightning component, every single component shares the same attribute, and it's body. Every component has an attribute called body, and you can inject components into the body of another. You can inject HTML, you can inject other components into the body of another component. That is called a container component, and then within your container component, you have to troubleshoot issues. Why are my events not raising? Okay, did I not tell my event handler to listen for facet events? And then locker service itself, this is a whole separate set of issues. I can't give you a lot of guidance on how to troubleshoot locker service issues other than go through the steps, go through the motions, and understand what locker service is and what it isn't. JavaScript itself, I could probably spend an hour talking about JavaScript issues. As Visual Force developers moving on to the Lightning framework, JavaScript is something I learned literally when I was 18 years old. Okay, so 78 years ago. JavaScript is a language that is difficult even for the masters of JavaScript. It's a difficult language to grok, first of all. And coming from Apex, it's even more difficult. Why? Because we have typing issues. JavaScript is loosely typed. And this freaked me out when I had to start learning Lightning. It freaks me out today when I have to go back and forth between Apex and Lightning, because Apex is strongly typed. We have to give every variable a type. We have to initialize every variable. In JavaScript, you can just say var my variable. It doesn't have a type. It doesn't get a type until you actually instantiate or initialize that variable or give it a value. So you run into typing issues. You're going to run into the word undefined. Okay, cannot apply property X of undefined. Undefined simply means you have a variable, you've defined a variable, or you've declared a variable, you haven't given it a value yet. And where you'll see issues with undefined is, let's say you're getting data back from an apex, a call to apex, and that call fails. Or there's something that happens with your data and it doesn't actually populate your variable data. You're going to get undefined errors. So the first time you see that, it's going to freak you out. What does undefined mean? I defined that variable. I said var my var. It just means that you haven't given a variable an actual value. Now null, this is not like null in Apex. You're not going to get the dreaded, what is the error in Apex? It is the, yes, attempt to dereference a null value. That is the worst possible error. Attempt to dereference a null value or a null object, or worst error possible. Null has a different meaning in JavaScript, so you have to balance the two against each other. Case issues. JavaScript, case sensitive. Apex, case insensitive. The first time you experience this, you say, I'm referencing my variable by the right name. What's going on here? Well, maybe you're using camel case. Maybe you're using Pascal case. Maybe you're using all caps because you're yelling at yourself. You have to follow your case, otherwise you won't be able to find your code. Okay, JavaScript will freak out because it doesn't find the right variables. Syntax issues. The renderer, the controller, the helper, these are basically JSON objects. JSON, JavaScript object notation. JSON objects are very simple. Curly brace, open, curly brace, close, comma. Curly brace, open, curly brace, close. If you forget to put a comma after, let's say, a function, if you have a comma after your last function, actually I don't think that trips an error anymore, but if you have general syntax error, if you haven't formatted your JavaScript correctly, Lightning is going to freak out. Truthy versus falsy. This, I'm not making this up. This is not something from a kid's comic book. Truthy versus falsy. When you have conditional logic in JavaScript, there are some values that are considered falsy. I could have a false value. I could have a 0. I could have null. I can have undefined. You have to understand this because you're going to run into these issues and you're not going to know what they mean. And then finally, callback hell. Does anybody know what this means? Okay, JavaScript is asynchronous. Of course, Paul knows what it means. JavaScript is asynchronous. Lightning is asynchronous. When you use $a.callback or get callback, when you make a call to the server, when you're doing anything that is outside of the life cycle of the framework, okay, JavaScript is taking care of stuff that Lightning doesn't know about. And you'll run into issues where you're waiting for something to come back, you're waiting for it to populate an attribute value, and something bad happens, your component continues to render, something bad happens behind the scenes, and you don't know what's happening. Understanding how to find and fix that is a big part of troubleshooting. All right, so common causes of Lightning component issues. I put spelling number 1. It sounds obvious. It is not obvious, as Barry can probably attest to. When we do exercises in Deb 601, you misspell something, the framework is not going to catch it. The compiler is not going to catch it. Okay, you're not going to find things until runtime. And then usually you'll get a somewhat meaningful error. Okay, maybe I transcribed 2 letters. Maybe I decided to become dyslexic for a moment. Okay, spelling errors are common. You try and reference variables. Okay, you misspell them. Or you use improper case. That's a very, very common issue within Lightning. JavaScript, we already talked about JavaScript. What does this mean? C dot versus C colon. What does C dot reference? Yeah, the controller. C dot is a reference to a value provider called the controller. Okay, you have the view value provider, you have the controller value provider, you have the global value provider. C dot is a reference to a value provider. Now, this may have just been somewhat of an oversight on Salesforce's part when they designed this. C colon, that's a reference to a namespace. That's our custom namespace. And unfortunately, if I reference, let's say I'm trying to reference a component and I use C dot and then the component name, the compiler doesn't catch it. And as of what release are we in? Spring 18, you don't get a specific error that says you're trying to reference something that doesn't exist. You just get a generic error message. Arguments that you pass to or parameters that you pass as arguments to functions. This is a big one. In JavaScript, I can have multiple arguments defined. They have to come in the proper order. And if you somehow screw up the order or if you forget to include a specific argument, JavaScript may fail, it may not fail. This is a difficult one, especially if you're in the controller. So in the controller, we have component, we have event, and we have helper. And you can name them whatever you want to. You can name them apples, bananas, oranges if you want to. You just have to put the arguments in the right order. This is a common error, especially with developers that are new to the framework, because you don't understand. It's not like Apex, where you have to provide a variable name and a specific data type for the argument that you're passing in. JavaScript doesn't care. You can pass in anything you want to. It'll try and use your argument based on the order that you pass it into the specific function, and if it's not correct, you don't know that until runtime. Component attribute scoping, again, private, public, global. You have to understand what they mean from the perspective of private means I can only use something within the context of the same component. Public means that I can use something within the scope of the same namespace. And global means that I can use something outside of my namespace. This has a lot to do with locker service. Okay, required attributes. If I have a parent component and a child component, and the parent component does not provide a required attribute value, you get another ambiguous error at the runtime level. Your component will fail on composition. It's now finally starting to tell you that you didn't provide a required attribute value, but that's a really difficult one to troubleshoot until you know what's going on. What's that? Sorry. V.attribute. This is another common one. Again, the compiler doesn't find this. I have an attribute. I need to reference its value. I forget to use v dot. Or conversely, and I do this all the time, if you're using Aura iteration and you have a local variable name, I typically use v dot in the local variable name, and then it fails. I'm like, what the hell's going on here? Oh, yeah, that's right. I don't need to use v dot here. And then this is more advanced, but if you use $a.getCallback, or if you forget to use it, if you fail to use it during an asynchronous operation, what ends up happening is the framework doesn't have knowledge of that function that you're running. So it goes and it runs that function, and it doesn't know that it's supposed to provide a return back to the framework. OK, so some methodologies, and I apologize. You know, this is just, it's a lot of content. I realize that we're just looking at slides here. I usually have more sexy visuals, but we're not going to have time to get into live demos or anything like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through these methodologies. I'll kind of walk through them. Any questions you have, because we're coming up on the demo jam. I talked to Simon last night. If anybody wants to continue after the allotted end time, we can either talk in here or we can talk out in the hallway. But I've come up with 4 methodologies for troubleshooting. Got the breadcrumb strategy, love notes, addition by subtraction, and CSS. And let me walk you through these. So the breadcrumb strategy, if you are having JavaScript issues, the error message that you'll get is it will give you the name of the component at the top of the heap, at the top of the stack where that actual error occurred. If you have, let's say, 20 child components that you're referencing, you don't know exactly where that error is occurring. So what I recommend is in your JavaScript code, you can insert a line with simply just the word debugger. And when you insert the word debugger, and then you have the Chrome inspector tools, or if you have Firebug open, what happens is your browser will stop at that checkpoint. It will give you the values of all your variables, and it will show you exactly what's happening in your JavaScript code. So what I recommend doing is, if you have a fairly substantial call stack, if you have a bunch of components that you are composing into a single application, add debugger statements to all the functions that are being called as part of that call stack. And then what you do is you walk through that, and you step through each debugger statement until you finally isolate the error. So as soon as you click the plus button on the debugger, or in the inspector tools, okay, and then your failure happens, you know exactly where it's happening. So you take the debug statements out, and you just keep moving them further down the call stack until you find the error. The love notes strategy, very similar, except you're using console.log. Console.log is just like system debug, where you're adding statements that are going to write anything you want to your console, the JavaScript console. So if you're having issues with getting data from the server, what you can do is you can write out the contents of variables to the console, and it will show you, here's what's happening. Remember this. If you remember one thing from this presentation, remember json.stringify. If you're getting objects back from the database, okay, and you try and write them out to the console will show object, object. You have to use JSON stringify, and what it does, it takes your object and it turns it into a string that you can then write out to your log. Addition by subtraction. If you're having issues with markup, they are the most difficult issues to troubleshoot. So go in and isolate your Lightning component code. Okay, comment it out. Put the less than sign, bang, dash, dash, and comment out things that you think are problematic. And just like the love note strategy, just like the breadcrumb strategy, start to move it down the stack until you isolate the issue and figure out what's going on. And I put a little note here, markup issues are the most difficult to troubleshoot. Okay, I got to wrap up here. So let me get through the CSS strategy, call it click some stuff. One of the things that you'll find about the Chrome inspector, the Chrome developer tools, is you can actually inspect something and you can go in and you can change the source code. You can actually inject your own CSS and you can see what's going on. So if you're having styling issues, what you can do is you can go in and inject your own styling, change the styling, see how it appears in the browser, learn that lesson, and then go in and apply it to your style resource. Okay, tips and tricks. This is the last slide I'll show you. I have additional slides on this, but I'm getting kicked out here. Enable debug mode with your components. Setup, custom code, Lightning components. Click the enable debug mode. When you do this, you get the unminified version of the framework, and you get more robust error handling, more robust error messages. Cache. Cache is the devil when you're doing rapid development. Turn off server-side caching. Try and limit your client-side caching. This is a big one. If you're having problems and you're having difficulty pinpointing where your problems are, wrap your components in a standalone .app resource. Okay, you can see this is an actual project that I'm working on, and you can see I have all these references to components. Show one at a time so you can isolate your issues. If you're trying to figure out what's happening in Lightning Experience, it's a problem. It's a huge issue because you have so much garbage that's injected by the one.app container. It's very hard to find component issues. So you can wrap them in a .app resource and find your issues. And again, I know I'm going over here, but I'm just going to keep going. Basically, when you have server-side issues, you can troubleshoot them at the client and the server-side level. What I recommend doing is keeping the developer console open when you're testing, if you're making a server-side call, because in the logs file, you're going to see any calls to the server, any Apex calls. So keep the server-side, keep developer console open when you're troubleshooting. That way you can get errors from the server and the client at the same time. Oradocs, okay. If you're not familiar with Oradocs, it's your instance of Salesforce /Oradocs/reference.app. It will show you the definitions for every component, every event. I just need 10 seconds. 10 seconds. That's all I need. Let me see. Let me get to the good stuff here before they physically drag me out of here. And then the final thing I recommend, learn JavaScript. Please learn JavaScript. There is a free Pluralsight course. Has anybody heard of Dan Appelman? He basically wrote the book on Apex. Getting started with JavaScript is an amazing course, 20 minutes. It will give you the primers you need. There's free books out there, JavaScript Enlightenment. You can go to my blog. I write stuff about JavaScript. I steal other blog posts and post them on my own blog. Learning JavaScript. It's a JavaScript framework. Lightning is a JavaScript framework. Learn JavaScript. It will save your life. And no time for QA. I will do QA out in the hallway before somebody comes in and breaks my arm. Thank you very much. I